Welcome to Story Planet, where we bring you tales that inspire and soothe. Tonight's story is The Forest Wanderer, an enchanting journey of discovery and harmony with nature. So settle in, find your cozy corner, and let yourself be carried away into the serene beauty of the wild. Now, let's begin. The Leap into Solitude. Marcus stood at the edge of the sprawling forest, a realm of ancient trees and untamed wilderness that stretched farther than his eyes could follow. The world he left behind felt a lifetime away. There had been no grand goodbye, only a quiet resolve to leave behind the race for wealth, status, and a life that felt increasingly hollow. With a sturdy backpack, a hatchet, and a small journal tucked inside, he took his first step into the unknown. The crunch of leaves underfoot marking the beginning of a journey unlike any he had ever known. The forest welcomed him with a symphony of rustling leaves and the gentle murmur of a distant stream. The air smelled pure, rich, with the scent of damp earth and pine. Marcus felt a calm he hadn't known in years. He walked until the light began to fade, settling by the bank of a brook that sparkled in the twilight. There, he pitched his simple tent, a modest sanctuary against the vastness of nature. As night fell, the forest came alive. Crickets chirped in rhythmic harmony, the hoot of an owl echoed through the canopy, and the occasional rustle of unseen creatures added an edge of mystery. Marcus lay awake, listening to the nocturnal symphony. The stars above were brighter than he remembered, unpolluted by city lights. For the first time in years, he felt small in the best possible way, part of something far greater than himself. Morning brought the golden hues of sunlight filtering through the trees. Marcus's first task was to find food. He had read enough survival guides to know where to start. The brook offered fish, its clear waters revealing flashes of silver darting between stones. With patience and a makeshift spear, Marcus caught his first meal. He cooked the fish over an open flame, its smoky aroma mingling with the freshness of the morning air. It was simple, unseasoned, and more satisfying than any gourmet meal he could recall. The day was spent exploring his surroundings. Marcus marveled at the abundance the forest offered. Wild berries hung in clusters, their sweet and tangy flavors a delight on his tongue. Edible greens sprouted in abundance, their textures and tastes a testament to nature's variety. He found mushrooms, carefully identifying the safe ones, their earthy aroma filling the air as he cooked them. A nearby tree dripped with sap, a natural sweetener that he collected for later. As the days turned into weeks, Marcus settled into a rhythm. He built a sturdier shelter using fallen branches and vines, crafting walls that blended seamlessly with the forest. His tools, though rudimentary, became extensions of his hands. A stone sharpened to a blade cut through vines with ease, and a hollowed-out gourd became his drinking vessel. Each item felt earned, imbued with a sense of purpose that money could never buy. The forest began to reveal its secrets. A family of deer often grazed near his camp, their graceful movements mesmerizing. Birds of every hue flitted through the trees, their songs a constant accompaniment to his days. Marcus found himself talking to them, his voice a soft murmur as if afraid to disturb the harmony of the wild. In the evenings he would sit by his fire, the glow casting flickering shadows on the trees. He wrote in his journal, filling its pages with observations, sketches of plants and animals, and reflections on his journey. "Why do we chase and run?" he wrote one night. "The forest gives freely. It asks for nothing. It has no concept of wealth or status. Life here is abundant, and yet it is simple. Perhaps that is the lesson we have forgotten." One day, as he bathed in the cool waters of the brook, Marcus realized how much his body had changed. His hands were calloused, his muscles lean and strong from constant use. He felt more alive than he had in decades. The forest had become his home, its rhythms as familiar to him as the ticking clock once was. The The first test of his resolve came with a sudden summer storm. Thunder rumbled through the forest, and rain fell in sheets, drenching everything in moments. Marcus's shelter, though sturdy, was no match for the deluge. He scrambled to build a makeshift roof from large leaves and bark, his fingers numb from the cold. But as the storm raged, he felt a strange exhilaration. The rain was a reminder of nature's power, a cleansing force that left the world fresh and new. When the storm passed, Marcus stepped outside, soaked but smiling. The forest sparkled under the sunlight, each leaf and blade of grass adorned with droplets that shimmered like jewels. The air smelled of renewal, and Marcus felt a deep gratitude for being alive to witness it. Days turned to weeks, and Marcus's connection to the forest deepened. He found joy in the simplest tasks, grinding nuts into flour, weaving grasses into a basket, or carving a wooden spoon. Each day brought new discoveries: a hidden grove of wildflowers, a trail left by a passing bear, or the hauntingly beautiful call of a loon echoing across a distant lake. As summer waned, Marcus felt a profound sense of contentment. He had become part of the forest, its rhythms now his own. The forest was no longer a place to survive, but a home that nourished his body and soul. For the first time in his life, he felt truly free. He had become part of the forest. Learning nature's rhythm. The crisp dawn of early autumn greeted Marcus with a chill that nipped at his skin. The forest's once vibrant green canopy was beginning to shift, dappling the earth with shades of amber, crimson, and gold. Marcus stirred the coals of last night's fire, its warmth lingering as he wrapped his hands around a bark-crafted mug of herbal tea brewed from wild mint and chamomile he had foraged days before. The tea's warmth seeped into his hands, a simple luxury against the encroaching cold. Each day in the forest had begun to feel like a chapter in an unwritten book, new challenges, lessons, and quiet victories filling the pages. Autumn's arrival demanded preparation, and Marcus devoted his mornings to gathering and preserving food. He discovered clusters of hazelnuts hidden beneath their spiny shells, piling them into a woven basket to store for winter. Mushrooms, ripe and earthy, grew in abundance, and he dried them carefully by stringing them on twine near his fire. Wild apples became a revelation. Tart and firm, they could be eaten raw or stewed into a thick, sweet pulp. Marcus experimented with pressing them, extracting their juices to create a rudimentary cider. The joy of self-sufficiency filled him with pride as he tasted his creations, the flavors untainted by anything but nature's essence. Adapting to the forest's rhythm extended beyond food. Marcus began refining his shelter, weaving a thick roof of interlaced branches and waterproof leaves. He lined the floor with layers of moss and dried grass, creating a soft bed that insulated him from the cold ground. A curtain of vines hung at the entrance, serving as a natural barrier against the wind. As the days grew shorter, Marcus felt the forest's pulse change. The bustling activity of summer gave way to a quieter, more introspective energy. Wildlife prepared for the coming cold. Squirrels scurried to bury acorns, their bushy tails flicking with purpose. Birds sang less, their melodies replaced by the soft rustling of falling leaves. Marcus observed these changes with awe, his own body aligning with the forest's ebb and flow. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Marcus set a trap he had fashioned from flexible branches and sturdy vines. By morning, he found a rabbit caught within, its fur soft and eyes wide. He felt a pang of guilt as he knelt by the creature, murmuring a quiet thanks before taking its life swiftly. The act was a solemn reminder of the cycle of life, a reality he faced with reverence. That evening, he cooked the rabbit over his fire, savoring the nourishment it provided while reflecting on the responsibility of taking only what was needed. The forest began to feel like a teacher, and Marcus its willing pupil. It demanded patience and respect, offering rewards only to those who listened. He learned to move quietly, his steps deliberate to avoid startling the wildlife. The more he observed, the more he noticed. The faint trails left by deer, the subtle shift in the wind that signaled rain, the way certain plants flourished near water sources. By the time the first frost kissed the earth, Marcus's days were a harmonious blend of labor and wonder. He harvested cattail roots, their starchy flesh a valuable food source. He began crafting tools from bone and stone, each piece a testament to his growing ingenuity. His journal, now weathered and smudged, overflowed with sketches and notes, chronicling everything from edible plants to the behavior of the fox that occasionally visited his camp. Evenings were his time to reflect. Wrapped in a thick blanket of furs he had fashioned, Marcus would sit by the fire, the crackling flames casting long shadows across the trees. He would stare at the stars, their brilliance unmarred by artificial light, and feel a profound connection to the universe. The forest's rhythm had become his own, a steady, unhurried pace that reminded him of the beauty and simplicity. Marcus began to understand that nature's gifts were boundless, asking nothing in return but respect. The forest provided food, shelter, and even companionship. The idea of money felt absurd here, a construct that held no weight in a world where survival depended on knowledge and adaptability. He thought often of the life he had left behind, the endless chase for material wealth, and felt a quiet triumph in having escaped it. Here, he was rich in ways that could never be measured. As the season deepened, Marcus's bond with the forest grew stronger. He began to see it not as a place to conquer, but as a partner in his journey. The forest demanded his full attention, rewarding him with lessons that could only be learned through immersion. It was a life of balance, of giving and receiving, and Marcus embraced it fully, knowing he had found not just a home, but a way of living that felt utterly complete. Autumn's embrace. The days grew cooler as autumn settled into its full splendor. Marcus woke to the crisp scent of fallen leaves, mingled with the earthy aroma of the forest floor. He had begun to look forward to the season's quiet intensity, finding joy in its ever-changing beauty. Each morning, he stepped out of his shelter to see the forest bathed in golden light, the leaves above shimmering like fragments of a stained glass cathedral. The rhythm of his days evolved with the demands of the season. He spent long hours gathering firewood, choosing the densest logs to ensure steady warmth during the coming winter. Marcus crafted a more efficient woodpile, stacking the pieces carefully beneath an overhang of bark he had secured from fallen trees. Each chore was a meditation, a purposeful act that connected him to the world around him. Foraging continued to be both a necessity and a delight. He found patches of wild cranberries, their tartness a bright contrast to the mellow flavors of autumn. Acorns were roasted over the fire, their nutty aroma filling the air. Marcus experimented with grinding them into flour, creating dense, hearty flatbreads to pair with the dried fruits and mushrooms he had stored. One afternoon, as he wandered deeper into the forest, Marcus stumbled upon a grove of towering chestnut trees. Their spiky burrs littered the ground, hiding smooth, glossy nuts within. He gathered them eagerly, knowing they would provide nourishment and variety to his diet. The simple act of cracking a chestnut open and roasting it over the fire felt like uncovering a treasure. The animals of the forest were equally busy. Marcus often paused to watch a squirrel dart between trees, its cheeks puffed with acorns. Flocks of geese flew overhead, their cries a poignant reminder of the migration season. He found himself marveling at their instinctual journeys, wondering at the paths they traveled and the stories their wings carried. Marcus's connection to the wildlife deepened in unexpected ways. One day, while fishing at the brook, he noticed a heron standing motionless in the shallows. Its long neck curved elegantly as it waited for its prey. Marcus mimicked its stillness, learning patience from the bird. When the heron finally struck, its precision was mesmerizing. Marcus's own fishing efforts improved as he adopted the heron's techniques, moving with quiet focus and respect for the water. As the nights grew colder, Marcus's shelter became a sanctuary. He added layers of insulation, weaving more moss and grasses into the walls. His fire burned longer, the crackling flames casting warmth and light into the darkness. He created a small clay pot from river mud, baking it in the fire until it hardened. This new addition allowed him to simmer stews of mushrooms, nuts, and herbs, their flavors blending into rich, satisfying meals. Evenings were marked by reflection. Marcus's journal entries became longer, filled with observations about the forest's intricate balance. The forest thrives in cycles, he wrote one night. Life and death, growth and decay, each plays its part. It is a harmony we have forgotten in our need to control and conquer. Here, I am reminded of my place within it all. The forest's silence was different at night. It was not an emptiness but a fullness, a quiet hum of life unseen. Marcus often sat outside his shelter, wrapped in his furs, listening to the whispers of the wind through the trees. He found comfort in the stars, their constellations guiding him through the long nights. Each one seemed brighter, more vivid, as if the forest had stripped away the distractions that once dulled his vision. One particularly cold evening, Marcus discovered the joy of storytelling. He began speaking aloud, recounting his day's adventures to the fire as if it were a friend. His voice broke the stillness, filling the air with warmth. He spoke of the heron, the chestnut grove, and the geese. The act of sharing, even with no one to hear, brought him a sense of connection, a reminder of the bonds that still tied him to humanity. As the season deepened, Marcus noticed subtle changes in himself. His thoughts were slower, more deliberate, like the forest around him. He no longer felt the rush to complete tasks, but moved with a steady purpose. The forest had taught him to trust its timing, to let go of the urgency that once governed his life. The first snowfall came earlier than expected. Marcus woke to find the ground blanketed in white, the trees frosted with delicate crystals. The air was sharp and clean, each breath invigorating. He stepped outside, his boots crunching through the snow, and felt a deep gratitude for the forest's gifts. Winter was approaching, but Marcus was ready. The forest had prepared him, and he embraced the challenge with open arms. Winter's arrival. The first breath of winter settled over the forest like a quiet whisper, transforming it into a realm of stark beauty. Snow fell steadily, blanketing the ground in a pristine white that muted all sound except for the occasional creak of trees under the weight of ice. Marcus woke to the stillness, his breath visible in the cold air of his shelter. He wrapped himself in furs, stepping outside to a world that seemed untouched by time. The silence was profound, broken only by the crunch of snow beneath his boots and the occasional soft rustle of snow falling from branches above. Survival in winter demanded a new level of ingenuity. Marcus's first task was to ensure his firewood supply was sufficient. He spent hours splitting logs and arranging them in covered piles to keep them dry. The axe he had fashioned from a sharpened stone and a sturdy branch became his most trusted tool. Each swing was precise, fueled by necessity and a quiet satisfaction in the work. The rhythmic motion of chopping wood became meditative, a way to keep his body warm and his mind focused. Food, too, required careful planning. Marcus relied on the stores he had prepared during autumn. Dried mushrooms, smoked fish, and nuts packed tightly in woven baskets. Foraging became scarce, but the forest still offered its gifts. Beneath the snow, he unearthed wild onions and tubers, their earthy aroma a reminder of life persisting beneath the frozen surface. He learned to recognize the trails of rabbits and deer, setting snares with increasing skill and thanking the forest for each successful catch. On days when luck favored him, he found grouse resting under snowy thickets, and their meat added a richness to his meals. His meals were simple but hearty. Stews simmered in his clay pot, filled with roots, herbs, and the occasional game meat. The warmth of the food spread through him, a small triumph against the biting cold. Each meal felt like a celebration of the forest's abundance and his growing ability to live in harmony with it. The smell of bubbling stew often filled his shelter, mingling with the smoky aroma of the fire and creating a sense of home amidst the wilderness. The wildlife adapted to winter in ways that fascinated Marcus. He watched as foxes moved gracefully through the snow, their red coats vivid against the white landscape. Birds that remained through the season flitted between the bare branches, their songs quieter but no less beautiful. Marcus's favorite visitors were the deer, their delicate steps barely leaving a trace in the snow. He often sat motionless for hours, observing their behavior and feeling a deep connection to the life around him. The occasional sighting of a wolf in the distance, its silhouette against the snow, reminded him of the raw power and independence of the wild. Nights in winter were long and cold, but Marcus found solace in the routines he had built. His shelter, now fortified with layers of bark and moss, held the warmth of his fire. He added a small vent near the roof to let out smoke, ensuring the air remained fresh. By the firelight, he carved tools and ornaments from wood, his hands moving instinctively as he shaped each piece. The act of creation brought a sense of purpose to the dark evenings, and each completed piece, whether a spoon, a figurine, or a functional tool, felt like a small victory over the isolation of the season. The stars in winter were sharper, their brilliance amplified by the crisp, clear air. Marcus often stepped outside at night, his breath a plume of mist as he gazed upward. The constellations became familiar companions, their patterns a reminder of the vastness of the universe. He felt small yet significant, a single thread in the intricate tapestry of existence. The longer he observed, the more he began to imagine the stars as storytellers, weaving tales of endurance, change, and beauty. One evening, as snowflakes drifted lazily from the sky, Marcus ventured to a nearby frozen stream. The ice sparkled under the moonlight, a crystalline path winding through the forest. He tested its surface, his steps tentative at first, until he gained confidence. Walking along the frozen stream, he felt a childlike wonder, his laughter echoing softly in the stillness. It was a moment of pure joy, a reminder that even in the harshest seasons, beauty and playfulness could be found. On particularly clear days, the forest would transform into a world of shimmering frost. Sunlight glinted off icicles hanging like chandeliers from the branches, and Marcus could hear the faint, melodic dripping of melting snow. He took these moments to venture farther, discovering frozen ponds and secret groves that seemed locked in a magical stasis. His journal pages filled quickly with sketches and descriptions, his words striving to capture the awe he felt at the artistry of the natural world. The challenges of winter also brought lessons in patience and humility. One frigid morning, a fierce wind swept through the forest, scattering snow in whirls and toppling one of Marcus's smaller wood piles. He spent hours retrieving the logs, his fingers aching from the cold despite the fur-lined gloves he had made. But even in these struggles, he found purpose. "The forest doesn't yield easily," he wrote in his journal that night. "And perhaps that's its greatest gift. It teaches us to work, to endure, and to find joy in the effort." As the weeks passed, Marcus grew stronger and more attuned to the rhythm of winter. His world had shrunk to the essentials: food, warmth, and the quiet companionship of the forest. Yet in this simplicity, he found a richness that surpassed anything he had known before. Winter, with all its starkness and challenges, had become a season of growth, a time to reflect and reconnect with the essence of life itself. The turning of the seasons. As winter loosened its grip, the forest began to shift in ways that Marcus could feel as much as see. The first hints of change came in the form of longer days, with sunlight lingering just a little longer over the snow-covered trees. The stillness of winter gave way to subtle sounds, the drip of melting icicles, the soft murmur of water beneath frozen streams, and the faint chirping of birds returning from their winter silence. These small awakenings filled Marcus with quiet anticipation. The forest's thaw was gradual. Patches of earth began to peek through the snow, revealing a damp, rich soil that seemed eager to burst into life. Marcus, too, felt the urge to prepare for the coming season. He set about repairing his tools, sharpening his axe, and retying the bindings on his bow. His shelter, which had served him well through the harshest months, needed reinforcement against the spring rains he knew would come. Food became a pressing concern as his winter stores dwindled. The forest, however, provided. Beneath the snow, Marcus uncovered caches of nuts he had buried in the fall, their flavors still intact. He began foraging for fresh greens, marveling at the resilience of wild onions and early shoots of fiddlehead ferns pushing through the thawing ground. Each discovery felt like a gift, a reminder of nature's endless generosity. The animals of the forest were equally busy. Squirrels darted between branches, reclaiming their hidden hoards, while birdsong filled the air with melodies that Marcus had almost forgotten. Deer ventured closer to his camp, their coats shedding the thick fur of winter. Even the foxes, elusive during the cold months, reappeared with their playful, curious demeanor. Marcus felt a renewed connection to the wildlife, as if they, too, were celebrating the turning of the seasons. With the thaw came challenges. The melting snow turned trails into muddy quagmires, making travel more difficult. Marcus slipped often, his boots caked in thick, clinging mud. The streams swelled with runoff, their currents swift and unpredictable. One particularly precarious crossing left Marcus drenched and shivering, a stark reminder of the forest's unpredictability. But even these trials were met with a sense of gratitude. "The forest tests us," he wrote in his journal, "not to break us, but to teach us how to adapt." As the days grew warmer, Marcus began to focus on planting. He had saved seeds from wild squash and beans he had found the previous year, storing them carefully through the winter. Now, with the ground softening, he chose a sunny clearing near his shelter to create a small garden. Using a sharpened stick, he tilled the soil, planting each seed with care. It was a simple act, but one that filled him with hope. The garden became a daily ritual. Marcus watered the soil with buckets he carried from the stream and built a makeshift fence of woven branches to keep curious animals at bay. He watched for signs of growth, marveling at the first green shoots that emerged. This tiny patch of cultivated land felt like an extension of his bond with the forest, a partnership that deepened with each passing day. Spring brought rain, torrents of it. Marcus fortified his shelter with additional layers of bark and moss, creating channels to divert the water away from his camp. The rain turned the forest into a vibrant, glistening world, the leaves and grasses shimmering with droplets that refracted the sunlight. It was during these rains that Marcus discovered the joy of simply being. He would sit under his shelter's overhang, listening to the rhythmic patter of rain on leaves, feeling the cool, fresh air against his skin. These moments, unburdened by tasks or worries, became some of his most cherished. The streams, now swollen and lively, became a source of fascination and sustenance. Marcus built a small trap, using stones and branches, catching fish as they swam upstream. Their silvery bodies gleamed in the sunlight, and their nourishment provided strength for the labor ahead. He often released more than he kept, grateful for the abundance and mindful not to take more than he needed. The forest's transformation during spring was almost overwhelming in its beauty. Wildflowers burst into bloom, carpeting the forest floor in vibrant hues of purple, yellow, and white. Bees buzzed from flower to flower, their hum a steady reminder of the intricate web of life that surrounded Marcus. Trees that had stood bare and skeletal for months now donned fresh green leaves, their canopies swaying gently in the breeze. Marcus found himself pausing often, his tasks forgotten as he absorbed the wonder of it all. The turning of the seasons also brought reflection. Sitting by his fire one evening, Marcus thought about the world he had left behind. The rush, the noise, the endless striving for more. Here in the forest, he had found a life stripped to its essence. The forest gives us everything, he wrote. It asks for nothing but respect. Why did we ever think we needed more? As spring unfolded, Marcus felt a renewed sense of purpose. His days were filled with work, but also with joy. The joy of being present, of witnessing the forest's cycles, and playing his small part in its grand design. The turning of the seasons was more than a change in weather. It was a reminder of life's resilience, of its beauty, and of the quiet power found in living simply, in harmony with the world around him. The Wunde. Summer's abundance. As the days lengthened and the air grew warmer, the forest shifted once again, transforming into a vibrant tapestry of life. Summer had arrived, and with it came a sense of energy and abundance that Marcus hadn't felt since his arrival. The canopy overhead grew dense and lush, the sunlight filtering through in dapples of golden green. Beneath it, the forest floor teemed with activity, ants busily constructing their intricate mounds, butterflies flitting between wildflowers, and the distant hum of bees collecting nectar. Marcus's small garden flourished under the summer sun. The wild squash and beans he had planted grew rapidly, their vines climbing the wooden stakes he had fashioned. He tended to his crops daily, weeding and watering with a careful hand. By midsummer, the first fruits of his labor were ready to harvest. Holding a ripe squash in his hands, Marcus felt an overwhelming sense of accomplishment. It wasn't just food, it was proof of his ability to live harmoniously with the forest. The forest's natural bounty also expanded. Wild berries ripened in clusters, their deep purples and reds inviting Marcus to taste. He found himself wandering farther afield, discovering patches of blueberries and raspberries hidden among the underbrush. Their sweetness burst on his tongue, a refreshing contrast to the hearty meals he prepared at camp. He gathered enough to make preserves, using honey he collected from a hive nestled in a tree hollow. Harvesting the honey was a careful process, requiring patience and respect for the bees, but the reward was a golden nectar that added richness to his meals. Fishing became a daily ritual. The streams, now calm and clear after spring's torrents, were filled with trout that darted through the water like silver streaks. Marcus fashioned a fishing spear from a sharpened branch and honed his technique, learning to move with the same stillness and precision he had observed in the heron months earlier. The fish he caught were grilled over an open flame, their skin crisp and their flesh tender. Paired with fresh greens from his foraging trips, his meals were a celebration of the forest's abundance. The heat of summer brought new challenges as well. Days of relentless sun left Marcus sweating as he worked, his muscles straining with the demands of building and maintaining his camp. He fashioned a wide-brimmed hat from woven reeds to shield his face from the sun, and spent the hottest hours of the day in the shade, carving new tools or repairing old ones. The stream became his refuge, its cool waters offering relief from the heat. He swam often, floating on his back and gazing up at the sky, his mind free from the worries that had once consumed him. Wildlife thrived in the summer. Deer grazed openly in sunlit clearings, their coats sleek and golden. Birds filled the forest with song, their melodies a constant backdrop to Marcus's days. He often found himself pausing to watch their movements, their small lives weaving seamlessly into the larger rhythm of the forest. Fireflies began to appear at dusk, their tiny lights blinking in the twilight like stars brought down to earth. Marcus would sit by his fire, watching their dance, feeling a profound sense of connection to the world around him. Summer storms rolled through the forest with sudden intensity, their arrival announced by darkening skies and the low rumble of thunder. Marcus learned to predict their approach, the change in the wind and the smell of ozone in the air, warning him to secure his camp. He found these storms exhilarating, their raw power a reminder of nature's dominance. He would sit under the overhang of his shelter, watching the rain pour down in sheets, the lightning illuminating the forest in brief, brilliant flashes. As summer progressed, Marcus noticed how attuned he had become to the forest's cycles. He could predict where the sun would rise and set, where the best foraging spots would yield their treasures, and when the animals would be most active. This sense of rhythm and understanding deepened his bond with the forest, making him feel not like an outsider, but a part of its intricate ecosystem. One afternoon, while exploring a part of the forest he had yet to visit, Marcus stumbled upon a hidden grove. Tall trees with wide, spreading branches surrounded a small, clear pond. The air here felt cooler, the light softer, as if the grove were a sanctuary within the larger forest. Marcus knelt by the water, cupping his hands to drink, the coolness refreshing him instantly. He decided to return often, finding peace in the grove's stillness and beauty. By the height of summer, Marcus realized how much he had changed. His body was lean and strong, his hands calloused but capable. His mind, once plagued by endless distractions, was now quiet and focused. The forest had become his home in every sense, its rhythms and demands shaping his days. And in its abundance, Marcus found not just sustenance, but a profound sense of gratitude for a life lived simply and fully. The waning light of autumn. As summer faded, the forest began to shift once more. The air grew cooler, and the vibrant greens of the canopy gave way to fiery hues of orange, gold, and crimson. Leaves fell in gentle spirals, carpeting the ground in a soft, rustling blanket. Marcus welcomed the change with quiet anticipation, finding beauty in the forest's transition and solace in the familiar rhythms of nature. Autumn was a time of preparation. Marcus knew that the bounty of summer would not last, and the forest would soon demand endurance. He spent his mornings gathering the last of the season's berries, their sweetness a fading gift. Mushrooms flourished in damp corners, their earthy aroma filling his shelter as he dried them for storage. He foraged diligently, collecting nuts and seeds, his woven baskets filled with the treasures of the season. The animals, too, were busy. Squirrels darted through the branches, their cheeks stuffed with acorns. Bears, rarely seen during the summer months, began to appear in the distance, their hulking forms a reminder of the forest's raw power. Marcus observed them with a mix of awe and caution, ensuring he kept a respectful distance. Birds migrated in flocks, their calls echoing in the crisp air as they journeyed to warmer climates. Marcus's small garden, which had provided so much during the summer, began to wither. He harvested the last of the squash and beans, their vines browning and brittle. With careful hands, he saved seeds from the best plants, tucking them into small pouches to plant again when spring returned. The act felt symbolic, a promise to the forest and himself that life would continue. The shortening days brought a new sense of urgency. Marcus spent hours gathering firewood, selecting the densest logs to ensure long-burning warmth. He built his woodpile with care, layering it beneath a makeshift roof to keep it dry from autumn's frequent rains. Each piece of wood felt like a safeguard against the coming cold, a reminder of the forest's ability to provide. Evenings in autumn were marked by a golden light that bathed the forest in warmth. Marcus often paused during his work to watch the sun dip below the horizon, its rays filtering through the trees in long, slanting beams. The forest seemed to glow, as if it were savoring the last moments of the season. These sunsets became a ritual for Marcus, a time to reflect on the day's efforts and the profound peace he had found in this life. Rain came more frequently, its steady patter a soothing backdrop to Marcus's evenings by the fire. He fortified his shelter with additional layers of bark and moss, creating a snug refuge against the dampness. The sound of rain on the roof, combined with the crackle of the fire, filled his nights with a comforting rhythm. He often wrote in his journal during these hours, his thoughts flowing as freely as the rain outside. One particularly stormy afternoon, Marcus ventured deeper into the forest, seeking a new source of inspiration. He discovered a grove of towering oaks, their roots gnarled and ancient. Beneath their branches, he found a sense of reverence, as if the trees themselves were keepers of the forest's history. He gathered fallen acorns, marveling at their potential to grow into giants. The grove became a place of quiet reflection, a sanctuary within the ever-changing forest. The wildlife grew quieter as autumn deepened, their movements more deliberate. Marcus noticed the absence of birdsong, replaced by the rustling of leaves and the occasional snap of a twig. Deer, their coats thickening for winter, moved cautiously through the underbrush. The forest's energy shifted, becoming more subdued, yet no less alive. As the first frosts kissed the ground, Marcus prepared for the transition to winter. He lined his shelter with furs and added insulation to the walls, creating a cocoon of warmth. His clay pot, a trusted companion through the seasons, now simmered with hearty stews of root vegetables and dried herbs. The meals were simple but satisfying, a testament to his growing self-reliance. One evening, as he sat by the fire, Marcus watched the embers glow and felt a profound sense of gratitude. The forest had taught him so much: how to survive, how to adapt, and how to find joy in simplicity. As the leaves fell and the nights grew longer, Marcus embraced the rhythm of the seasons, knowing that the cycle of life would continue, as it always had, and that he was now a part of it. Winter's deep silence. Winter returned with a quiet ferocity, draping the forest in its familiar white shroud. The frost's grip tightened as days grew shorter, and the sun, when it appeared, cast a pale, fleeting light over the landscape. Marcus woke each morning to the biting chill of the air, his breath forming misty clouds that hung briefly before dissolving into the stillness. Survival during the heart of winter demanded every ounce of Marcus's resourcefulness. His firewood pile, meticulously built during autumn, proved invaluable. Each log fed the fire that crackled and glowed, radiating life-saving warmth throughout his shelter. He began his mornings stoking the embers, their heat warding off the icy tendrils that crept into his space overnight. Food became a constant focus. With the ground frozen and foraging nearly impossible, Marcus relied heavily on the stores he had prepared. Dried mushrooms, nuts, and smoked meat formed the basis of his meals. Occasionally he ventured out with his bow, tracking the sparse movements of deer through the snow. The hunt required patience, hours of silent waiting in the cold, but the rewards were critical. Each successful hunt meant more meat to smoke and furs to layer his shelter. The forest's wildlife seemed to move in harmony with the season's austerity. Tracks in the snow told stories of nocturnal wanderings, foxes darting after prey, rabbits bounding between thickets, and the heavy, deliberate steps of a lone wolf. Marcus marveled at the interconnectedness of it all, feeling both a participant and an observer in the intricate web of life. One day, while gathering water from a nearby stream, its surface partially frozen but still trickling beneath, Marcus encountered a sight that left him in awe. A herd of deer stood at the water's edge, their breath forming clouds as they drank. The sunlight caught their coats, turning them into fleeting statues of gold and silver. Marcus stood motionless, his presence unnoticed, and watched until the last deer disappeared into the forest. The silence of winter was profound, yet never empty. The crunch of snow beneath Marcus's boots, the whisper of wind through bare branches, and the distant creak of ice expanding and contracting became a symphony of subtle sounds. At night, the howls of wolves echoed in the distance, haunting and beautiful. Wrapped in his furs by the fire, Marcus listened with a mixture of respect and wonder, reminded of the untamed world around him. As the days stretched into weeks, Marcus's routines became rituals. He spent his mornings tending to his tools, ensuring his axe and bow remained sharp and functional. Afternoons were often spent exploring the forest's transformed landscape. The snow revealed hidden paths and created new ones, leading Marcus to discover places he had not seen before. A frozen waterfall, its cascading layers of ice glinting in the pale sun, and a cluster of pine trees whose branches formed a natural cathedral beneath the snow. Evenings brought a quiet introspection. Marcus's journal, now nearly filled, captured his thoughts and observations. "Winter strips life down to its essence," he wrote. "It demands respect, patience, and resilience. And yet, in its starkness, there is a purity that feels almost sacred." These reflections deepened his sense of purpose and his connection to the forest, a bond forged through shared hardship and mutual giving. The longest night of the year arrived with a sky so clear that the stars seemed close enough to touch. Marcus built a large fire outside his shelter, its light flickering against the surrounding trees. He sat beneath the stars, wrapped in layers of fur, and let his mind wander. He thought of his life before the forest, the noise, the endless striving, the unrelenting pace. Here, under the vast expanse of stars, those concerns felt distant and unimportant. The forest had shown him a different way to live, one rooted in simplicity and reverence for the natural world. As the fire crackled and the stars wheeled above, Marcus made a silent promise to himself. This life, stripped of excess and grounded in the rhythms of nature, was the life he would choose again and again. Winter, with all its challenges, was not something to endure but a season to embrace, a reminder of the strength and beauty found in adapting to the world rather than bending it to one's will. The deep silence of winter became a mirror, reflecting Marcus's own growth. In the stillness he found clarity, in the cold he found warmth, and in the forest's enduring cycles he found a sense of belonging that he had never known before. The first thaw. The first signs of spring arrived quietly, almost imperceptibly, amidst the deep silence of winter. Marcus noticed it first in the mornings. The air, though still sharp, carried a faint hint of warmth, a subtle softness that spoke of change. Tiny rivulets of water trickled from the edges of the snowpack, glistening under the pale sun. The forest, which had stood frozen and still for months, seemed to take its first tentative breath. The snow, once a solid white expanse, now revealed patches of earth beneath its melting edges, where tiny green shoots began to peek through. Marcus adjusted his routines to embrace the transition. The thaw made the forest more treacherous. The once firm paths now turned to slippery mud, and streams swelled with snowmelt. Marcus fashioned a walking stick from a sturdy branch to steady himself as he navigated the shifting terrain. Each step was careful, deliberate, as he explored the awakening forest. On one of his early ventures, his boots sank deep into the mud, and he spent an hour digging out, laughing at the comical reminder that the forest demanded humility. With the melting snow came the unveiling of the forest floor. Patches of green began to emerge, tender shoots pushing their way through the damp earth. Marcus crouched to inspect them, marveling at their resilience. Wild onions and ramps appeared first, their sharp, fresh aroma a welcome change after the preserved and dried foods of winter. Nearby he discovered patches of moss, glistening in the damp air, their vibrant green adding to the growing palette of spring. Marcus gathered the onions eagerly, incorporating them into his meals alongside the last of his winter stores. A simple stew of onions, dried meat, and roots took on new life with the addition of the fresh shoots. The streams, now rushing with renewed vigor, provided a feast for the senses. The sound of running water, absent for so long, filled the forest with a soothing rhythm. Marcus spent hours by their banks, watching as the sunlight danced on the surface and fish darted beneath the rippling currents. The stream became his lifeline once more, a source of sustenance and serenity. He crafted a small fishing net from the vines and fibers he had stored during the previous seasons, finding success in catching trout that glinted like silver under the spring sun. The wildlife, too, responded to the changing season. Squirrels ventured from their nests, their frantic energy a stark contrast to the languid pace of winter. Birds returned in small flocks, their songs tentative at first, then growing bolder as the days lengthened. Marcus spotted a bear, thin from hibernation, wandering near a patch of berries that had overwintered beneath the snow. He kept his distance, respecting its space, and felt a kinship in their shared need to adapt to the season's demands. He also noticed the reappearance of rabbits, their soft tracks scattered through the mud, reminding him of the cycles that continued, undisturbed by his presence. The forest's transformation was gradual yet relentless. Marcus found joy in each small change, the first crocus breaking through the snow, the faint buzz of an early bee, the smell of wet earth after a light rain. These moments reminded him of the forest's endless capacity for renewal and filled him with a quiet optimism. One afternoon, while wandering further than usual, Marcus stumbled upon a hidden glade, carpeted in violets. Their delicate petals swayed in the breeze, and he sat among them for hours, feeling an overwhelming sense of peace. As the thaw progressed, Marcus turned his attention to his shelter. The melting snow revealed damage to its base, where moisture had seeped in and weakened the structure. He spent days repairing it, reinforcing the walls with fresh bark and moss. The work was arduous but satisfying, each improvement a testament to his growing skill and resourcefulness. He also fashioned a raised sleeping platform from fallen branches, ensuring he would stay dry during the inevitable spring rains. Evenings during the thaw were particularly beautiful. The setting sun cast a golden light over the forest, illuminating the mist rising from the melting snow. Marcus often sat outside his shelter, wrapped in furs, watching as the light faded into the soft hues of twilight. The calls of birds settling in for the night mingled with the gentle murmur of the stream, creating a symphony of sounds that soothed his soul. The crisp scent of thawing earth mixed with the smoke from his fire, enveloping him in a sense of completeness. One evening, as Marcus tended his fire, he noticed something he hadn't seen in months. The faint glimmer of fireflies. They flickered in the growing darkness, their tiny lights weaving patterns through the air. Marcus smiled, their presence a sure sign that spring was on its way. He watched them until the last ember of his fire faded, their glow a comforting reminder of the cycles of life. To him, these fireflies were like lanterns heralding the season of renewal, filling the dark forest with gentle hope. The first thaw marked a turning point, both for the forest and for Marcus. It was a season of renewal, a time to rebuild and prepare for what lay ahead. But it was also a reminder of the lessons he had learned, to move with the rhythms of the world around him, to find joy in simplicity, and to trust in the resilience of life. One night, as he lay in his shelter listening to the sounds of the thaw, he realized something profound. The forest had endured another winter, and so had he, stronger and more vibrant for the challenges they had faced together. A summer of harmony. With the thaw behind him and the forest fully awakening, Marcus stepped into a season of balance and growth. Summer brought with it an abundance that the forest seemed eager to share, and Marcus felt more attuned to its rhythms than ever before. The canopy overhead thickened with leaves, creating a mosaic of green through which sunlight dappled the forest floor. The air buzzed with life, from the soft hum of bees visiting wildflowers to the calls of birds weaving melodies through the trees. Marcus's small garden, carefully planted during the early days of spring, now thrived in the warmth of summer. Vines of squash and beans sprawled over the wooden trellises he had built, their fruits heavy with promise. He spent mornings tending to the garden, pulling weeds and ensuring the soil remained moist during the drier weeks. Harvesting his first squash filled him with quiet pride, its weight in his hands a tangible result of his patience and care. The forest itself continued to provide generously. Berries ripened in vibrant clusters, their sweet tang a refreshing treat during long days of work. Marcus foraged for wild herbs and greens, often stumbling upon hidden groves where nature's offerings grew in abundance. He experimented with new combinations in his cooking, combining the tartness of fresh berries with the savory richness of roasted roots and game. Each meal was a celebration of the season, a reminder of the forest's endless ability to sustain him. The streams, now running clear and steady, became Marcus's sanctuary during the heat of the day. He often waded into the cool waters, letting the current wash over him as he leaned back to watch the clouds drift lazily above. Fishing became both a necessity and a joy, his skill with a handmade spear honed to precision. The glint of fish beneath the water's surface was a familiar sight, and each catch brought a sense of gratitude for the life that sustained him. Wildlife thrived in the summer, their movements more visible in the dappled light of the forest. Marcus often observed deer grazing in clearings, their fawns playfully bounding between patches of wildflowers. Foxes, sleek and red against the greenery, darted through the underbrush with quick precision. Even the occasional bear, a hulking, majestic presence, passed through his territory, leaving massive prints in the soft earth as it foraged for berries and roots. These encounters, though rare, filled Marcus with awe and a deep respect for the creatures that shared his home. Storms were frequent but brief, their arrival announced by the low rumble of thunder and the sudden cooling of the air. Marcus learned to predict their coming, the changing wind and darkening skies signaling him to secure his camp. He loved the storms, their power a reminder of nature's untamed energy. Sitting under the shelter he had carefully crafted, he listened to the rain pounding against the leaves, the flashes of lightning illuminating the forest in brief, electric brilliance. After the rain, the forest seemed to breathe more deeply, its scents richer and its colors more vibrant. Evenings during summer held a magic all their own. As the sun dipped below the horizon, fireflies emerged, their tiny lights dancing through the twilight. Marcus often sat by his fire, watching their glow while reflecting on his journey. He felt a profound sense of peace, a realization that his life here had become not just an escape, but a true home. The forest had taught him patience, resilience, and a deep appreciation for the interconnectedness of all things. One particular evening, Marcus ventured to a nearby hilltop he had discovered earlier in the season. From its summit, he could see the vast expanse of the forest stretching out in every direction, a sea of green rolling into the horizon. The setting sun painted the sky in hues of orange and pink, its light casting long shadows over the treetops. Marcus sat there for hours, the cool breeze carrying the faint scents of pine and wildflowers. He felt small yet significant, a single thread in the intricate tapestry of the natural world. As summer progressed, Marcus began to reflect on the future. The forest had provided for him in ways he had never imagined, and he felt a growing desire to give back. He started planting seeds not just for his own use, but to encourage the growth of plants that would benefit the wildlife around him. Wildflowers for the bees, berry bushes for the birds, and sturdy saplings to replace the fallen trees. These small acts of stewardship deepened his connection to the land, transforming his presence from that of a visitor to a true participant in the forest's cycles. By the height of summer, Marcus had found a rhythm that felt as natural as the changing seasons. His days were filled with purpose, his nights with peace. The forest, in all its complexity and simplicity, had become not just a place to survive, but a place to thrive. As he sat by his fire on the last evening of the season, watching the embers glow against the backdrop of the darkening trees, Marcus smiled. Life, he realized, was not about conquering or possessing, but about living in harmony with the world around him. And here in the heart of the forest he had found exactly that. A journal open on his lap, sharing the forest's wisdom. As the last days of summer faded into autumn, Marcus sat by his fire one evening, a journal open on his lap. Its pages, filled with sketches, notes, and reflections, chronicled the journey of his year in the forest. The words and images told a story not just of survival but of transformation, how the wilderness had stripped away his old fears and desires, replacing them with something far deeper. He realized that what he had learned here was not meant to stay hidden. The world outside, the one he had left behind, could benefit from the lessons of simplicity, balance, and harmony that the forest had so generously taught him. The decision to share his experience came naturally, as if it had been part of the journey all along. Marcus imagined a book, not just a survival guide, but a testament to the power of nature to heal and inspire. He envisioned chapters that would take readers through the changing seasons, immersing them in the forest's beauty and challenges, while weaving in the insights he had gained. "The Forest Wanderer," he murmured, testing the title aloud. It felt right, encapsulating both his role as a student of the wild and the story he wanted to tell. In the days that followed, Marcus began organizing his thoughts. He carried his journal to his favorite spots in the forest: the stream where he had first learned to fish, the hilltop that offered sweeping views of the canopy, the grove of violets that had become his sanctuary during spring. Each location stirred memories, and he filled new pages with vivid descriptions and reflections. He wrote of the deer grazing in autumn light, the heron's graceful patience by the stream, and the silent power of winter storms. Every detail, every sound and scent found its place in his growing manuscript. Marcus also thought about the people he had left behind, friends and family who had watched him walk away from a life they considered normal. What would they think of his journey? He imagined their skepticism, but also their curiosity. The book, he decided, would be his way of explaining, not just to them, but to anyone who felt trapped by the relentless demands of modern life. Perhaps they'll see, he thought, that there is another way to live, one that is simpler and yet infinitely richer. The process of writing became as fulfilling as the life he had built in the forest. He found himself reliving moments with newfound clarity. The taste of wild berries on a summer morning, the exhilaration of walking across a frozen stream under a canopy of stars, the quiet joy of planting seeds in spring and watching them grow. These memories, now immortalized in words, felt like gifts he could share with the world. One afternoon, as he sat by the stream where the water now flowed gently, Marcus saw his reflection in the clear surface. His face, weathered and strong, bore the marks of a year lived fully. He no longer looked like the man who had stepped into the forest a year ago, burdened by the noise and weight of a life unfulfilled. Here, in this wild, untamed place, he had become someone new. And yet, he knew it was time to return. Not to leave the forest behind, but to bring its wisdom to others. As the days shortened and autumn painted the trees in shades of gold and crimson, Marcus began preparing for his departure. He gathered the remaining fruits of his garden, sharing some with the wildlife that had become his companions. He left seeds scattered in fertile patches, a quiet promise to the forest that he would always give back. His shelter, which had served him so well, he left intact, a refuge for whoever or whatever might find it next. On the morning of his departure, Marcus stood at the edge of the forest, his journal tucked safely in his pack. He turned back for a long moment, the trees towering above him, their leaves whispering in the breeze. "Thank you," he said softly, his voice carrying a mix of gratitude and farewell. The forest had been his teacher, his home, and his sanctuary. It had shown him how to live not just with the land, but within himself. As he walked toward the world he had left behind, Marcus felt a sense of purpose he had never known before. The book he would write, the stories he would tell, were not just for others, but for himself, a way to honor the journey and ensure that its lessons endured. The forest, with its cycles of growth and renewal, had taught him that every ending was a beginning. And so, as he stepped out of the wilderness and into the unknown, Marcus smiled. His journey was far from over. Thank you for joining us on Story Planet. If you felt immersed in Marcus's journey of harmony with nature, consider giving a thumbs up. If his story brought you peace and inspiration, feel free to share it with friends and family. Don't forget to subscribe for more serene tales, delivered daily, to help you unwind and relax. Wishing you a restful night and sweet dreams.